Welcome. I am really excited to be here tonight. This is going to be a very meaningful presentation and conversation that we've invited you into. For a lot of people, I think it's going to be life-changing and maybe even life-saving. And I'm not, it's not hyperbole. It's just from my experience and knowing the subject matter, what's at stake, and Dr. Dan Pompa and his work. These things come together to do something really special tonight. And literally thousands of you had replied, with your RSVP, your interest in wanting to see this information, understand it. And I know why you'd want to, and I know how many people are struggling out there. So I just want to give everybody, right at 7 o'clock, a lot of people had chosen to come here tonight. And I just want to give a moment or two for people to come on board. So stand by just for a few moments. We'll get right into the heat of it in a few, probably about maybe give it 60 seconds or so. Let me just look at their timing here. Uh, Hang on. Again, if you're just showing up, welcome. Thank you for being here. We are going to get started here in a few seconds. Very excited for the conversation that we're going to be having tonight. As I said earlier, just a few moments ago, I think it's going to be a life-changing conversation, maybe even for some people, life-saving. So again, thank you. And just stand by for a moment. We will be getting started. I got Selena here running text. Selena, I just want to make sure that we're running out on the page that's streaming. And I got a yes. Okay. Yes with an exclamation. So thank you. Okay, again, thank you for being here. We're going to just get started in a moment or two. Excited to give this presentation, and I think we're 2 minutes in. That should be enough time for the people who showed up. I like to reward people who get here on time. So thank you for being here, and thanks for your patience, and we'll get started. So here's what's interesting. We sent out a communication to the Gentempo.com audience, the community, and basically said, there's a lot of people who are reporting that they're having struggles, chronic illness, mystery illness. They're getting all kinds of tests. Many times they're getting on prescriptions and medications. They're not finding answers. They don't know what's wrong. They many times feel like it's something psychological, something's going wrong with them. Lack of energy. Well, maybe it's your thyroid. Maybe it's, any number of things that they tell you it might or could be. Looking just for something to hold on to say that, hey, at least I know what's wrong, and then maybe I can do something about it. But nonetheless, for many people, the solutions aren't coming. The answers don't seem accurate, doesn't corroborate their experience. I can tell you from personal experience with my wife, who went through years of trying to get this sorted out and figure it out, and all the testing and the different doctors, et cetera, trying to figure out why is her energy down, why is she not feeling right, something feels off, something feels wrong. And what we're going to be talking about tonight with Dr. Dan Pompa, who's not only a colleague and a dear friend of mine for decades now, he's also a preeminent expert in this arena who's having a massive impact on the world right now. And I asked if he wouldn't mind staying up a little bit later tonight and having a conversation with me to talk about what his expertise and understanding is. And in doing so, our sincere purpose in being here is to serve you and hopefully give you some hope, share some stories, and let you know that you're not alone out there. So Dan, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, I love this topic, called to it, and this is a very, very important topic right now as the numbers are just escalating of people who have tried everything and still don't feel well. And that is a growing number of people, and there's a reason.
Indeed. And you have come to this work kind of through your own journey, right?
Yeah.
I knew about you, way back when you had a large legendary practice in Pennsylvania, serving a lot of people, really passionate about the work you did. And then something sort of happened, which put you into a new journey. So, let's just start there, and so people can understand where you came from.
It started like just so many people. It just started with just some general fatigue. And from the fatigue, it went to other symptoms, right? Because I had fatigue, but you know how that works, right? We justify it away. It could, I'm working so much. I had two young boys at the time, you know, uh, training on my bike. I was, doing a lot of miles. I'm overtraining. So cut back on the training. Things actually were getting worse, not better. Then it was like these weird headaches. Then it was like this weird anxiety. Then it went to like just massive brain fog where I just like couldn't think anymore. And then it went to where I had weird insomnia where I'd like either couldn't get to sleep, wake up middle of the night, couldn't get back to sleep. Then my gut went, started chasing the foods, right? Then it was like just weirder symptoms, sound sensitivity, irritability, anger. My wife would literally have to take the kids out of the house. Look, I mean, it just got more and more crazy, and I, like probably so many people, I just started looking for answers, right? It's like you start, spending most of your free time just going, what the heck happened to me? And there was a time where I literally looked at my wife and said, maybe I'm just crazy. I mean, honestly, maybe I should just be put on a psychotropic drug. Maybe I'm just nuts. And thank God I had a wife that just always anchored me back. You were fine. You're going to figure out what the cause is. You're going to get better. And this is a true part of the story. Honestly, things got very bad. I'm making it sound probably easier than it is. And every once in a while, I anchor into a part of my story where it like, oh, it brings me into a very emotional state because probably a trigger, could have been something that just like reminded me of something very specific. When I was telling this story not that long ago, I remembered being at this place called Idlewild Park. And I remember it was a day that I felt pretty decent. And I had those days every once in a while. And so I had a lot of hope that I was going to bring the kids to the park and have a good time. And I remember the day the anxiety started coming on. And of course, I was fighting it mentally, and then the fatigue. And I just watched my kids see the signs. And that was a very emotional moment for me because I could see in their eyes they got fearful, right? And then I heard my one son say to my wife, "Is Daddy going to be okay?" Right? And then that was it, right? I broke down, right? And here we are, supposed to have a good family day. So every once in a while, I just tap into those emotional times, but oftentimes when I tell the story, it just becomes rote because I've told it so many times. But this part of the story never becomes rote for me because, this is why I'm here. My wife literally crying out for answers for us as a family and obviously for me. And I'm sure she did this many times, but this particular time, God spoke to her heart literally that not only am I going to get well, that He was going to get me well, but I'm going to take an answer to the world. And when she would say that, I didn't want to hear it. That's the truth. I couldn't hear it because my exact words to her were, I can't even get myself well. How dare you put that on me, right? And that was where my thinking was. So I didn't go through this like, Mr. Faithful, trust me. But here I am today. My wife hung on to that because, by the way, it's oftentimes differently stressful and hard for the loved ones around you than it is for you. But she hung on to that promise that God gave her like this. And, she was right. God was right through her. I didn't choose any of this. I've been training doctors for 20 years on the information you're going to hear tonight. Um, so I'm not smart enough to come up with it. I do now believe in my heart of hearts, He led me to every bit of it for such a time as this. The amount of people looking for answers has just gone up dramatically over the last, even 10 years. I mean, 20 years for sure, but even the last 20 years, I mean, 10 years have been just incredible. The number of people who just can't figure out what's wrong. And I have a unique answer. And again, God gave it to me, and here we are. So that's my story.
Yeah, it's startling how many people are searching for answers now and how fast that's escalating. And it's a big reason why we're here tonight. Maybe you could share for a moment, what the breakthrough was or what you finally figured out was going on that was creating your problems where you got to a point where
Yeah.
you were
You
just,
know, one of the things that I teach doctors or and anyone, it's typically a perfect storm, meaning three stressors come together. If you remember the George Clooney movie, it was Perfect Storm. Literally they showed three storm fronts hitting together, and a catastrophic storm took place, and many people die. And every 1 in 100 years, these perfect storms happen. Well, this is not, this is happening all the time, but three stressors, it could be physical, chemical, or emotional stress come together. It could be two chemical stresses. My case, I was living in a low-grade moldy home, and I had a lot of mercury exposures throughout my life. And by the way, the number one mercury exposure, where it often starts, is in utero. Ladies, the number of fillings in your mouth, moms, is proportional to how much they find in the baby's brain. That's a study called the DRAS study. Those silver fillings contain 50% mercury, and they vaporize mercury, and it goes into in utero into the baby's brain. So we start, and by the way, that was an autopsy study, very accurate. And so that mercury accumulates in the brain, slows down the detox pathways that get rid of it, and then you start really accumulating. And of course, so my mother had a bunch of fillings. They put them in my mouth. I don't know what age I even got the first ones. I wore contact lenses, which the saline solution contained 50% mercury. And
wow.
yeah, more than that. I'm sorry, that was the amalgams, but it contained mercury in a form of thimerosal, and it was the number one adult source.
Mm,
So I was putting that in my eyes. Of course, there was a time where I was being healthy and eating a lot of fish, tuna. So I had a lot of exposures, but here's where it all started, to answer your question. It took me 3 or 4 years to figure it out. I didn't figure it out right away. But I had two silver fillings drilled, the ones that contain mercury, drilled out. And after that, I got oddly fatigued, but I never associated it. I never put two and two together. Matter of fact, looking back, I thought it was the anesthetic. I thought I was just reacting to the anesthesia. I never thought it was the anything else, right? And that wasn't, it just never occurred to me. That was like set my bucket overflowing, right?
mm,
That was my tipping point. At that point, I just didn't remember. But when looking for answers, I came across something called Mad Hatter's disease, and I don't know if those listening, know what that is, but they were making people that made felt hats used mercury as part of the process. Some say even lead, but regardless, they became known as Mad Hatters, like Alice in Wonderland, the Mad Hatter, right? But I had every symptom. And so I did what you'd think. I went and got a blood test. Matter of fact, that day I spent over $5,000 worth of blood tests. How I know is because I didn't have insurance, and it crushed us, but didn't matter because I thought surely we were going to find something. Matter of fact, if they came back and said you have cancer, I'd have been like, okay, because now I at least know I'm going to fight something. Because believe me when I tell you this, I would rather die than spend my life like that, right? It's that my biggest fear was not death. My biggest fear was spending my life like it was. But he came back with something absolutely worse than any of that. He came back and said, "You're healthier than me." I
mm,
was like, "Oh God." I
mm.
mean, I chased my thyroid, my adrenals for so many years because they were not right. My hair was thinning. I mean, my thyroid was dysfunctional, but my blood work was normal. There's a reason for that, and we can talk about that. But my adrenals were shot.
Incidentally, yeah, and just to pause there for a second, so often people who are having the types of problems and symptoms that you're talking about are diagnosed with thyroid issue, right? And
Yeah.
they're treating the thyroid,
Yes.
but the thyroid's not the problem.
That's right. The thyroid is the canary in the coal mine. Now, Patrick, you and I know what that is, but we're dating ourselves. They literally they literally used to bring canaries in the coal mines because they were so sensitive to chemicals, and if there was a gas exposure, the canary would die, and the miners knew that they had time to get out.
Mm,
Now they have sophisticated equipment for that. But hence the term canary in a coal mine. So the thyroid is that it's so sensitive to certain neurotoxins that it just goes, it causes dysfunction very quickly. Now, here's the problem. It takes years, 10, 20, 30 years of that dysfunction before your blood work goes out of range. They don't tell you that.
Mm,
And there's actually a reason for that. And it's worth exploring this because this gives an explanation of why so many people have symptoms and you feel like you've done everything or doing everything better than your friends and you still don't feel well. Okay, this is what wasn't explained to me, right? So on every cell, we have 50 trillion of these cells in our body. I'm drawing one as an example. You have these hormone receptors on all the cells. Look, they're to every hormone, right? But thyroid hormone is the one I'm discussing. T3 has to connect to that receptor. No different than your cell phone has to connect to a tower for it to work, right? It doesn't matter if you have $1,000 cell phone, it's useless if something's blocking that signal. That's all happened to us, right? It doesn't work, you don't get your message across. Well, same with these receptors, or same with these hormones. When it connects to this receptor, all is well. It gets its message in the cell, you feel well, right? In the case of thyroid hormone, your brain works because you need to make ATP for your brain to work, right? You burn fat for energy, you stay lean, you have plenty of energy, right? All these things, wonderful. But what if something's blocking that cell tower? What if something's blocking that receptor and the hormone doesn't get in? Well, here's the thing. It doesn't matter what your blood levels look like. No, it doesn't matter if TSH, it doesn't matter if T3 in your blood are normal or even made normal. Meaning you could be given a hormone and make this blood level normal. Like say once it's out of range, give me 5, 10 years, my blood levels would have been out of range. And then they would have given me a hormone and heroically they would have said, oh, it's all good now, right? Your blood work looks perfect after a month or two, right? But I would say, like many of you, I still don't feel well. So I don't care what you're telling me. My hair's still thinning. I still can't lose weight. I have no energy to get through a day. I'm using stimulants. I got brain fog, right? Anxiety. Okay, blood levels are relevant if that hormone can't get in the cell. So the better question is, what possibly could be blocking not just my thyroid hormone, by the way, that could be estrogen, that could be testosterone, that could be insulin.
mm,
Insulin resistance, you know what that means?
mm,
That means your insulin is being resisted, right? So this is hormone resistance. Well, this is all through the scientific literature, folks. Something called inflammation is what's blocking this cellular inflammation or blocking these hormone receptors. And it doesn't matter what you do. Matter of fact, when you have cellular inflammation, you can't even get nutrition in the cell that you
mm,
need to feel good, to make energy. Something worse happens.
yeah,
Toxins start building up in the cell because they can't get out. It's no different. Look, if I burned wood in a fireplace, right? If the damper's open, when you burn wood, you make what? You make smoke. No different than when your cell in a place called the mitochondria makes energy. Okay, so we feel good. It makes waste, just like burning wood. You make energy, you make waste. Simple as that. When that damper's open, it goes out good. But if someone closes that damper, like cellular inflammation is closing the dampers that lets the toxins in and the good stuff, or the toxins out and the good stuff in. Well, when those dampers are closed, now these toxins build up.
mm,
It's like, I don't know if people know cars, but people that want fast cars, you see dual exhausts, right? So they're able to get the exhaust out. You actually build more power in the engine. Okay, it's
mm,
a trick that you use to make your car have more horsepower. But what if someone clogs that? Actually happened to me, Patrick. Listen, this is a true story. We were in high school, and I think we were at a party, and there's always someone that doesn't like you in high school, I guess, right? And so they literally, well, unknowing to us, they put an apple in the exhaust pipe, and I'm driving home with my friends, and the car, I'm like flooring it, and it's getting less and less power, flooring it. I'm like, are we even going to make it? At first, I'm not even telling anyone because I thought it was just the weight of everybody, right? And then like another like 5 miles, it's puttering, and we come to a dead stop. Engine gonzo, kaput. We're calling our parents to pick us up. Well, what happened is the exhaust wasn't getting out. The event, eventually the engine cut out. That's happening to many of you. Like your engine's cutting out because you're building up the exhaust, the toxins in the cell because of its inability to get out because of something called inflammation. So the question you should be asking is, what's driving inflammation and do I have it, right? I mean, because if you do have it, Okay, you don't hear your hormones, your hormone resistance. Some people call it closed door syndrome. You don't get nutrition in the cell. Diet changes aren't working. Seems like nothing's working. And you start getting a bunch of bizarre symptoms. Why? Because how you feel is determined by the function of your cell, and
Mhm.
toxins are building up. That, in a nutshell, is what I've been teaching people for 20 years. And I learned all of it, how to fix that,
Yeah.
and, that's the exciting thing that I teach.
So it's really sort of a epiphany, I guess, in a sense, right? Because this is what you had to do for yourself, detox out the mercury, detox out the mold. And not easy to do, right? I mean, that stuff, once these things get in your system with my wife, Lori, it took really kind of deep and more sophisticated lab tests to
Hmm.
figure out what was going on. Because same kind of thing. But looking at all her parameters, she looked like the picture of health, right? I mean, you'd
Yeah.
look and say, gee, I wish my parameters looked like that. She was really good on all of them, but the way she felt was like, she was very sick and
Yeah.
had no energy and just wasn't herself. And finally, deeper looking into what's going on, they started to find accumulation of pesticides in her
Mhm.
system, some mold in her system. And the consequence, now they're seeing where the loads are, the toxins that have accumulated. And then, of course, the solution was working on a program to detox, right, to get those things out. So, how hard is that to do? Like if people have the eureka, wow, okay, at least I have an explanation. Then getting stuff out is not necessarily a snap of the fingers. This could be a process, right?
First of all, I tell everyone to start with a very accurate test. We've used it for many, many years, more accurate than a blood test you can go to your doctor and get. It's a take-home test.
Mhm.
It measures cellular inflammation, unlike a CRP, C-reactive protein, which is an accurate assessment of general inflammation. This one is cellular inflammation. It measures something called melanoaldehyde, which an inflamed membrane gives off. It's accurate. Now, you could screw up the test by drinking alcohol the night before because aldehydes would throw the test off. Just don't do that. Otherwise, it's accurate. But it is a very accurate urine test that you can do at home. We tell everyone to start there, and I know we're going to make it. We're going to make that available to all of you for showing up here. But that is the place to start, and the reason why it's a place to start is because if you have cellular inflammation, it is the reason why you're pulling your hair out. It's falling out anyway. Um, but it is a reason why that you don't feel well, and it's we know we can fix it. One of the things I teach is my 5 R's, and real detox is a cellular issue.
Mhm.
So it's not as simple as sitting in a sauna. I have a sauna. I love a sauna. It's not as simple as a 10-day cleanse. It's not as simple as, doing the 10-day detox that comes in a box. It's not as simple as taking what I call poopers, meaning these things that make you go to the bathroom, although that can be really helpful and important. But my point is this. The reason we're seeing so many hormone problems, weird conditions, diabetes, you name it, okay, the anxiety levels, it's this. It's the cell. My
Mhm.
saying is if you fix the cell, you get well. If you don't, you won't. Okay, so this is where detox really is, meaning the amount of toxins that we are dealing with today is different than when we grew up, Patrick. Do you understand? The generation now is like under a load of toxins that we've never seen in the history of humanity. And I could go through and talk about what's happening right now. But here's what's happening: the apples in the exhaust pipe, meaning that this cell has an ability to detox and it does it day in, day out. Remember, I said when you make energy right here in this vital area called the mitochondria, when you make energy there, you make waste, right? So, therefore, our cells have to get rid of it. If it didn't, we would die. But what's happening is like I was hitting the gas going, it was getting less and less power. That's
Mhm.
what's happening here. the cells are wearing down their ability to get rid of toxins. So when you start to feel like you're not yourself anymore, your ability to get rid of these toxins, the toxins that are coming into your cells
Mhm.
and the toxins that are building up because of the cells of making energy. It's called endogenous, meaning it's, sorry, my dogs are barking,
Yeah.
but it's endogenous toxins. These are toxins that are building up because you're making energy. It's like burning the wood in the fireplace, right? So the idea here is if you're truly going to detox, you have to fix what's broken. This is why humanity is so sick. This is what's happened in the last 20 years is our pathways are diminished. These pathways, there's many. I could bore you with details about glutathione. It's a one pathway that you need to upregulate to start getting rid of toxins. Methylation pathways.
Mhm.
It's a pathway that's so important for detox and getting rid of these toxins that it is overstrained. Even emotional stress depletes these methylation pathways. And when they're depleted, you can't even get rid of toxic hormones. And now you have toxic hormones building up, which causes other problems, including cancer. One is called 4-hydroxyestrone. And when 4-hydroxyestrone builds up, now you are a great threat to developing breast cancer, but you get other hormone conditions too. So the point is that these are just pathways that are under great stress, methylation, glutathione. Oh, I do weekend seminars to doctors about the membrane. Of course, its importance to hormones, but its importance to detox. It's everything. Yet, and people have inflamed membranes and they cannot detox. So, without the details, real detox is right here.
Mm. So for people, let's say that this is the first time they're hearing this, right? And they've been dealing with these mystery symptoms, these mystery
Mhm.
illnesses. Um, what's probably the most important thing for them to understand? If we lay out, for example, hey, there's probably a whole overlooked aspect of your predicament that most doctors, and I'm not disparaging them, they just don't get taught what you just demonstrated, and kind of portrayed here as far as what's going on in the cell and what to be looking at, et cetera. They have a different sort of approach towards analysis that isn't in this arena. And I think it's important that people understand that they should not feel, how can I put it? They shouldn't start blaming themselves and feeling guilty because, to your point, so many toxins are in the environment now. I was just literally on set, today in a documentary, and we're talking about literally how toxic the environment has gotten and how these toxins are everywhere, unavoidable, and
Mhm.
the impact that they're having. I mean, just things as ubiquitous as like glyphosate, which is, everywhere now, putting fluorine in the water everywhere. I mean, we can go down long lists, but bottom line is there's that it's not your fault. Number one, it wasn't that you did something bad or wrong.
Mhm.
Literally, just living a human life in today's environment is
Ah,
something that can expose. We even talk about, right, fillings in your teeth. Your dentist put these things in. I mean,
yeah, I trusted
you
your dentist,
yeah.
right? Yeah. And by the way, when the ADA was approached about this originally, they said, "Oh, nonsense, the mercury's locked in those." Okay, that was an easy test. You rub it with a pencil, it's not. Vapor comes off. Oh, well, it's too little to matter. Yeah, well, that wasn't true either. It was far the opposite. Oh, and then, oh, that's a 25-year-old filling. All the mercury's gone anyway. Don't touch it. No, if you Google smoking tooth video, that is a 25-year-old filling for a reason because they rub it with a pencil to show the mercury vapor on a fluorescent screen pouring off of that filling. You know where it goes? Right into your brain. Oh, a place in the brain called the pituitary hypothalamus. You know what that does? Yeah, it's your control tower for all your hormones, right? When I looked at what was going on with me, and I was like, dang, it's like doing all this for my thyroid, my adrenals, my hormones. I feel like it's like the feedback loop's wrong. And I narrowed it down to I think the problem's in my pituitary. And I was right, but I was for the wrong reason. I would try to address it by taking some glandulars, things of that sort. And And oh my God, it's like I thought I was going to die. The anxiety was so bad.
Mm.
What I learned is mercury accumulates in that control tower. And again, folks, it's what controls your thyroid. The hypothalamus takes information in from the body and says, we need more of this, less of this, right? So think of it. And then it tells the pituitary what to release, thyroid stimulating hormone. So then it releases and says, hey, we need more, we need less, right? Well, imagine the control tower being messed up in an airport, right? We have planes, crashing, that just happened, right? But
Yeah,
planes crashing
sore
in.
subject today. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that's exactly what happens when your control tower is poisoned. And by the way, there's other things that do this. Right now, what's happened in the last 10 years? So they're putting aluminum in jet fuel. It's part of it, not just aluminum, there's other chemicals too. And it's a more efficient jet fuel. So companies are saving millions, possibly billions of dollars because the planes are able to fly longer. That sounds like a great thing, but unfortunately, aluminum is literally falling down on us because of this, getting into our food supply, our water supply. Listen, we
And
got
into your
mercury.
armpits.
Yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. If you're using that, oh, and you're cooking. There was food
Cooking with it.
presented to me today, and it was cooked in aluminum foil. I politely didn't eat it
Yeah.
because don't use aluminum, right? It's like, but it's falling out of the sky. Aluminum and mercury have a synergy that makes it far more toxic with way lower amounts. We're already exposed to mercury. We have this aluminum exposure now that's through the roof. We wonder why our brains aren't working. We're wondering why neurodegenerative conditions are happening in younger people, dementia, all of it. It's like, oh my God, it's like no wonder our brains can't work. There's so much inflammation being driven by these types of toxins. Look, 20 years of teaching, and again, I speak it. The only reason I didn't even realize how important what God taught me would be now because it is so different than when I was sick compared to now. There's one way to get this stuff out of the brain safely. I'm telling you. And again, I'm not boasting as I say it. The only reason I know it is because he showed it to me. So many people are trying, like doing different things like cilantro to get things out. No, that it's a disaster. It doesn't happen like that. You don't sit in saunas, in cold baths in hyperbaric chambers and get mercury and aluminum out of your brain. It doesn't work like that, or out of your cells for that matter, right? There's a right way to do it. But this is what people need today to get their lives back, right? Real detox is at the cell, and so much of it is in human brain cells. And that's a problem. By the way, you mentioned the chemical glyphosate, Patrick. This creates another perfect storm. Folks, if you don't know what the chemical is, it's a chemical that's being sprayed literally on most of our food supply. Okay, unless you're buying 100% organic. But here's the thing, it's in 60% of rainfall. That's how ubiquitous it is in our society. And it is in all of us, right? Okay, the problem is this 2012 study, Stephanie Seneff, she was the senior scientist at MIT. She was one of the first to show that this chemical allows heavy metals like mercury and aluminum that I just spoke about. Matter of fact, they were spoken about in the study to cross deeper into our brain. It opens up the protective barriers of our brain and allows this stuff to go even deeper. She believes it's why we're seeing all of these autism, dementia, Alzheimer's, all of these conditions on the rise. Oh, and it also opens up our gut barrier and allows more toxins through, creating leaky gut, leaky brain. So we're being exposed to a chemical that's making these toxins that they're throwing at us like crazy in our food, in our personal care products. Ladies, on average, you start with 400 and some chemicals, 218 known cancer causers every morning. Men were probably not that far behind. But the point is this, is that these chemicals are working synergistically together, creating cellular inflammation, right? And if you're not doing something about it, you're going to fall victim. It's a matter of when. This is probably the greatest example. My wife graciously brought me a cup of water. This is filling up with toxins from utero. What did I say? The biggest mercury exposure happens in utero. By the way, lead. The number one lead is in utero, is the biggest exposure from mom. Most lead is stored in the bone. Okay, it just is. It's very normal to lose bone during pregnancy because of estrogen changes, but out comes the lead. into utero. So we start with mercury, lead, and then we start getting our own exposures. Our detox pathways are slowing down. And then this bucket right here, if this is a bucket, one day is going to overflow. And that's the day that I got my silver fillings out. That day's different for all of us. But once it overflows, here comes all the damage. Here comes the symptoms of the diagnosis, maybe, right? But how do we get well? We have to empty that bucket. So if this was filled way to the top, which many of you are there, right? Just a little bit of stress. Look, I still spilled it. See, it's still too high. It still went down on me right there. Okay. A little bit of stress and it's overflowing. But imagine if I brought it down to here. I could stress it a heck of a lot more. And that's where we need to be, right? But how do we get it down? Right? Well, that has to happen in every cell in the body. When your cells start functioning again, that's how you truly get your bucket unloaded. But when it overflows, that's where we're at. That's where we're at. Let's drink some. There's no toxins.
Well, and that's an important point is that once you start having symptoms, this has been brewing for a long time. Symptoms are the last thing, as you're saying, the bucket's getting more and more full. And then when it hits its tipping point, it starts to overflow. Suddenly now, boom, all these symptoms start to come and all this stuff starts to happen.
Yep.
And what happens sometimes, you say, well, I felt better for a week or two. Well, maybe it just got down a little
Yeah.
bit and then back up
Well,
again.
and actually, I'm glad you said that because see, this bucket, your body doesn't know the difference of physical, chemical, or emotional stress. So think about this as your stress bucket, right? It doesn't know the difference. So maybe your stress, your emotional stress is a little bit less and you do okay. So it empties the bucket just a little bit. But then you get a little more emotionally stressed and you see the difference. Now you're
Mhm.
not tolerating, now you're overflowing. The key isn't getting less stress out of your life, although that's a good thing. But the point you would argue, and so would I, that there's certain stressors I can't get rid of. My kids, my wife, my husband, whatever it is, right? There's certain stressors. Now, our responses to stress we can definitely change, but there's a certain level of stress we're not going to be able to get rid of. But we can do something about the toxic stress. And once you get that down, you can handle a heck of a lot more. All of a sudden, you think about stress differently. You see, because when you adapt to stress, now you're going, you know what? Kids will be fine. But
Mhm.
when your bucket's full, nothing's fine. Trust me, I was there. Nothing's fine, right? I'm a positive thinker. I am I am. I mean, it's like I absolutely, am very easy, evenly keel. I'm not overreactive person. I'm a very calm person by nature. When my bucket was full, I was the worst. I couldn't handle a screaming child. It was too much. When my wife would, I remember hangers, like the noise of like hangers going, I'd be like, oh my God, could you just stop that? See, it wasn't the hangers. I remember one time she was doing her nail polish on the kitchen counter. I was like, oh my God, I couldn't handle it. It wasn't the stress. It was, I couldn't adapt to it, right?
Yeah.
Because my bucket was full. That's the thing. So to your point, you may have ups and downs
Mhm.
because of emotional stress, this and that. But the fact is you've got to lower it. You've
Yeah.
got to lower the load. Otherwise, you're going to get the diagnosis, right? You will.
So the process, and here's what I hope, at least at this point in the conversation, if you are someone or know someone who has the types of challenges that we've been talking about here, very chronic in nature, very vague in nature, very mysterious sometimes in nature, not finding solutions. And incidentally, really important thing to understand, pharmaceuticals are also toxic for you.
Mm,
I mean, drugs, you know, maybe sometimes have an application in
mhm,
limited circumstances, but taking pharmaceuticals on a chronic basis has a toxic effect on your body. Why do you think they have those sheets that talk about all the adverse effects that these
sure.
drugs have? Watch a drug commercial on TV, just one, and look at how they have to list all the adverse effects of the drug that may include these long list of things. Why? They're toxic.
Mm.
So I'm not saying that sometimes in certain circumstances taking a prescription is a good
Yeah,
idea.
time and a place. There's a time and a place.
There's a
Yeah.
time and a place, but it's not a solution. You're not sick because there's a lack of drugs in your blood. If you're feeling these symptoms, there's something else going on, and you're adding toxic load when you start taking. And what might it be? It might be because of all the challenges I'm facing, I'm not sleeping at night. Well, you're going to take a sleeping medication. I feel starting to feel anxiety, and incidentally, a lot of people who have the predicament that Dan's been describing throughout this conversation, they are filled with anxiety, and for good reason. And that anxiety starts to peak, and next thing you know, they're taking anti-anxiety medications. They
You
get
know,
depressed. Go ahead.
it, and the only reason I didn't is because of a deep-rooted philosophy. There was literally, I remember the conversation that turned to my wife and said, maybe I should. Maybe I should. But I knew a lot. I knew that if I went down that road, it was going to be a lot harder to get out. And to Patrick's point, it's going to fill my bucket more, right?
Yes.
But I get it. Life gets to the point where sometimes we have to cover the symptom. I mean, but it was like it was my deep-rooted philosophy that kept me from that. And of course, looking back, I'm glad I didn't do that. But I wouldn't judge anyone who did, number one, because I get what that feeling feels like. And I get that there's a time and a place to say, I just can't do it anymore. Right. But ultimately, at the end of the day, even with your supplements, I'll ask the question, is it decreasing what's in your bucket? Because if it's not, it's not getting to the cause, right? It's like cause and effect. It's, if you get to the cause of why, what's interfering your body from healing, you're going to heal. Toxic building. This is not my opinion. I mean, it is so clear that this is why people are so sick. Do you ever wonder why? Have any of you gone to Italy and they eat 20% more carbohydrates than Americans? Okay. Pasta, bread. I've been there. You've been there, Patrick. Where are the fat people? They're not there, are they? You can tell the tourists, the Americans, from the Italians and the French too. And they joke about it. They talk about it, right? It's like, what is the difference? Believe it or not, the difference is the chemicals that have been outlawed there than that we are still ingesting here. Yeah, yeah, these chemicals, they have names, even in the scientific literature, they're called obesogens. These are chemicals that make us fat. Yeah, chemicals that block our hormones and we can't burn fat for energy despite what we do. Many of you changed your diet. You'll say listen, I eat better than my friends and I still can't lose weight. Listen, when I was sick, I got skinny fat. My body literally was eating its muscle, my metabolism getting lower. Because what happens, this is just worth saying this, your cells can only use two things for energy, sugar or fat. When you're healthy, your body can go back and forth. Okay. If you're not eating, it'll burn fat like at night. It'll just burn fat and you stay asleep, all is well. But when you're broken because of certain toxins blocking certain hormones, you become locked as a sugar burner with the hormonal inability to burn fat as energy. Okay, so now you're broken. So guess what your body does? It has two choices, okay, when you're not eating, like at night. Your body can break muscle down into sugar. It's called gluconeogenesis, but then your metabolism gets slower and slower and slower, and you get skinny fat like I did. I got fat like in my waist, which I never had before. Maybe you get fat in your hips or places you never had, and you get in your part, you look worse in a mirror, right? Because you're getting skinny fat. Or some people just get fatter, right? But either way, you're stuck as a sugar burner with the hormonal inability to use fat as energy. But here's what happens to some of you. And this is why if you're someone who fails on diets, it's not your fault. Follow me. I mean it when I say that. It's not just words. What happens when you're stuck as a sugar burner, instead of saying your innate intelligence goes, I don't want to break your muscle down anymore into sugar because I know I might need it to run from a lion one day. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give you a craving you can't resist. It's that smart. And
Yeah.
so guess what? You see the bread, you see whatever it is, and you eat it and you keep breaking it out and you beat yourself up because you're like, I just can't stick to a diet. I can't stick. No, your body's saving your life because it's saying, I don't want to use muscle anymore for sure. I'm going to give you a craving you can't resist because I have to, I need energy. See, how do you get to be a fat burner and a sugar burner and be able to go back and forth? That's a toxic cell, right? You get rid of the cause And the new effect will be you'll start using fat as energy. So, oh, by the way, that explains why many of you have anxiety, because guess what happens? Your body starts to release cortisol because glucose follows cortisol. So it's like, hey, I can't burn fat, so I'm going to raise up your cortisol to raise up your glucose just to save your brain, and then you end up with anxiety. I wake up in the middle of the night with debilitating anxiety because of cortisol rises. But anyways, these are broken cells.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting in that, and I've heard you speak on it before, and we've had interactions on it. This can be a very complicated subject, as far as saying there's a lot of complexities in understanding all of this cell biology, cell physiology, inflammation, hormones, the interactions between them, how things happen, the interplay between the gut and the rest of the body and what happens there, the gut and the brain. I mean, there's so much to it, right? And you kind of like takes a while to map it all together and see the big picture. But if we get to what I refer to as far side simplicity, saying we cross the complexity arc and we're landing somewhere. And
Yeah,
where we're landing, I think, is the simple place saying that if this gets over full, it's going to spill over and it's going to create a world of pain and problems for you. And the simple solution is to get the toxins out of the cell and out of the body. And when you do that, healing occurs, real healing. You can't heal if you're bathed in toxins, how do you heal? You have to get them out of the system, and we're exposed to them everywhere. So
everywhere.
as far as taking steps, and I think it's a good time for us to talk about this, you have a test kit. Because now,
Hmm.
because now the next question is it should be on your mind is for yourself or whoever you're here for right now
Yeah.
should be, how do I know if this is going on in me? So can you explain the test kit?
Yeah, look, I did this. Your team is going to provide this, thank God. Normally it's $500. You get the test, and then you get an appointment. So you have a report of findings about the test, right? There's also something called a neurotoxic assessment that I need you to take. 20 years of teaching this. Every toxin has a fingerprint, meaning people with mold exposures, which is a biotoxic illness, certain infections, heavy metals, even certain ones. There's certain fingerprints that they have. Over the years, we know exactly what these look like. So we need that history along with, do you have cellular inflammation? $97.
Mm.
And that covers my expert's cost and the cost of the test. And I hope everyone takes advantage of that because, that's an incredible deal you're making. Your team's going to make that. I don't know. Is there a link they're putting in?
Yeah,
What
I
is,
think if you look on the page that you're on right now, you're looking on the at the video frame right below that. If it depends if I don't know if you're on your phone or an iPad, computer, whatever. Just scroll down and you'll see the special offer. And again, and thanks for that. Incidentally, it's literally 20% of the normal cost is $500, and it's down to $97.
yeah,
And
97.
and this
That
is
that is the test and the neurotox questionnaire and the appointment,
Yeah.
everything. So
So it,
yeah,
it covers it all. And that's the first step that to me, and that's what I was hoping for is basically saying, take that step and just find out. Find out where you are right now. It's an easy first step, high touch, high service. Get the test, have a consult, get the information, and now you at least have a context from
yeah,
which to start your journey to detox, to heal, to get better.
yeah.
So I appreciate, Dan, very much that you've made that special offer. And again, it's right there on the page for you.
Okay.
It's a to me a no-brainer and something that I think if you're not feeling right, somebody's not feeling right. This is the first step to take it. It's an easy
It's the
step.
only it's the only first step because first of all, I'd never say we can help everyone, but I can tell you we know who we can help. So I've been doing this for so long, all right? And it always starts there. And look, I think the hard part, because I've been there, is when you get to that place. it's so hard to take a step. It's so hard. I mean, you probably picked up like this much, but I hope you picked up enough to say, okay, no one's ever told me that before. That makes a lot of sense, and it explains at least why nothing's worked for you,
Mhm.
because that is why nothing's worked for you. And it should explain why you don't feel well still. All right. And at least be able to take that one step to understand, okay, cellular inflammation is the starting point. So yeah, I think it's the only step that people can really truly comprehend to say, okay, right? Because we don't know, is it mold illness? We don't know what neurotoxin, but I had neurotoxic illness, and to put a shell on what it's called.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you, people, you do start to think you're crazy after a while, and you do lose hope after a while. So don't lose hope. And I want to say this, my life has been from pain to purpose, meaning I sit here because of the purpose, that I have and what God showed me in it, right? But a promise. Remember, it was the promise my wife held on to that God gave her. You're here for a reason.
Mhm.
Someone's praying for you. Maybe you're praying for yourself, and I hope you are. But there's a promise for you, right? I mean, God has a promise and He has a purpose in it. You might not see it. I didn't see it, right? But there is. And, so you made it this far. I didn't suffer for a reason. I suffered for such a time as this for people just like myself looking for an answer. And by the way, when you're about ready to walk into a promise God has for you, I'll tell you what happens. You start to have the fear, the doubts, and resistance, and all of that takes place. And Patrick, you've heard me talk about this, right? There's three words, rak, kazak, amatz. Those are Hebrew words in the Bible. There's several places in the Bible, when someone was about to walk into a promise God had for them, the fear, the trepidation, the doubt would come. God would send somebody to speak rak, kazak, amatz to them. So in your Bibles, if you look for be strong and courageous, that's the English words, but that doesn't do it justice. The Hebrew, and I'll just paraphrase, it means God has stepped in ahead of you,
Mhm.
before you. It's His strength,
Mhm.
not yours.
Wow.
And the one example that everyone knows, and there's many, but this is the one most people know. 40 years, the Israelites waited for a promise that God had for them to step into the promised land. Here they are crossing the Jordan, and all they saw was 31 armies. And all they could talk about to Joshua was all the reasons why they're going
Mhm.
back to Egypt, and why did you even bring us here to die? All these giants that were moving in, but God spoke through Joshua, Rak Hazakamats, Israel, meaning I got those enemies.
Mhm.
Step into the promise I have. So, God has a promise in it. Step into it.
And I think, in summary, if we look at what healing really is and understand it, and this is the thing that sometimes strikes people who've been struggling for a long time, and you start to lose faith, you start to lose hope, you start to lose
You
some of the
do.
more spiritual things that are
I
necessary.
did. I did.
It happens, but there's one thing that I'd like to bring your attention to, is that my own philosophy, my own perspective, is that you were not born to be sick. That,
Hmm.
we weren't born to be sick. You were born to be healthy. Why do you think the body regulates itself and heals itself? This is, what we're discussing here isn't some miracle drug that's going to come into your body and do something to it. We're literally just looking at getting things out of the way so your body can do what it's designed to do.
It is that simple.
It is that simple. And and this is where that first step into faith around your body, what it's capable of, hope
Hmm.
that you can heal after years of trying and it's not working. Those things have to be solid foundations for you to kind of take a step, a pause, a moment, and just say, wait a minute, where I am
Hmm.
in my life is not who I am.
That's right. That's right.
Some,
My
some,
wife reminded me of that. This is not who you are. Those are her words.
Yeah, it's not who you are. And that's the thing that creates anxiety and depression. It's like, I've got a light to express, and it's being distorted. It's being disturbed. And getting in there and removing the distortion, allowing your body to heal like it's designed to do, is what we need to all move forward toward. So don't lose faith in your
Mm,
body. Don't lose faith in what created it. It was designed in so even today I was just reading something and I'm like, that some of the components of tears that have are antimicrobial, saying
mm.
because you have these tear ducts, right? Those are openings to go into your body, and there's these little components in the tears so that the tear ducts don't allow infections to come get into them. I mean,
That's how
the
smart it is.
the extraordinary amount of detail in this miraculous thing called your body, two cells becoming one and then turning into a multi-trillion cell complex organism 9 months later. Don't forget that.
Yeah,
Chiropractic, we always like to say, right? The power that made the body heals the body.
heals the body. Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's these understandings that we start to lose. We lose faith in our body. If we lose faith in its power to heal, then hope is lost. And when hope is lost, all is lost. So, I'm hoping in our showing up here tonight, for Dan and I, our prayer for you is to restore some hope, to know that your body is capable of healing,
Mm,
that loss and capacity is not your fault. You've been exposed to things that, are not your fault, but are the fault of some pretty dark forces that exist in the world.
yeah.
And that there's a path to solutions that can change all this for you. And if I can get you just to see yourself in a future where you're bright and you're happy and you're healthy and you're energetic, if that is there, then all things are possible. So take the first step,
Mm,
get a test, get a consultation, find out what's going on, and let that lead to a better place from where you are right now.
yeah.
So
Amen.
Dan, I always get inspired when I listen to you. So it put me into a little bit of a mode of hoping to bring some inspiration. And you've inspired me, and your work is just relentless. I don't know if I know anybody as committed to a purpose as you are, and going out and helping and healing people. So I just applaud
Because
that.
I know I'm called to it.
Yeah.
You hit on something that before every great shift in our lives, there has to be an identity shift,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
And so many people end up identifying too much with where they are. And I did, right? It was my wife who didn't, but it's like it takes an identity shift to see ourselves. Well, you said it, we were not born to be sick. It's not our identity. God didn't create you to be sick, right? Because somehow we think it's what we did. Somehow we think it's we deserve it, or we start to think that, right? Regardless, or we say, yeah, I'm a diabetic. Okay, that's an identity. I call that's a false identity. You're
Right.
not a diabetic. It's like, no, it's like the things that we're surrounded by cause. Most diabetes is actually caused by toxins,
Mhm.
for multiple reasons, but we are starting to, as a society, identify with these sicknesses,
Mhm.
and it's not who God created you to be. And so your hope, and Patrick just said it, it's like your hope should be in who God made you. I mean, our bodies have the ability to heal. Patrick, the things that we've seen in our day of what the body healed. No doctor, don't ever put your hope in me, Patrick, any doctor, nobody, put that innate intelligence that God put us there. Man, there's hope in that. Remove the interference, and I'm telling you, it's remarkable. It
Mhm.
is, and honestly, that's that philosophy that I held on to. It's like, but I hope that encourages people. You said something so beautiful there. So
Thank you. It's my hope too. And Dan, just deep, deep gratitude, for your time here today, for the Gentempo.com community, and
yeah,
on the broader sense to just what you're bringing to the world every day. Thank you for,
yeah.
many years of also dedicated and pure friendship. So I appreciate that from you
Amen.
also.
Yeah, love you too, Patrick. Yep. Love being a, a blessing to be a blessing.
Yeah. Well, and for you who are here, thank you. Thank you for your time and your trust and showing up. And I'm hoping that we shared something
Yep.
that is going to make a difference in your life. That's why we're here. So thank you for that. And at this point, I think we can conclude and wish you really well
Yep.
and hope that your future just is brighter and better.
Amen.